Hello and welcome to the San Jose State University School of Library and Information Science Career Colloquia session. This is Jill Cleese, the SLIS Career Consultant, and I'd like to thank each of you for joining us tonight in our discussion on expanding your horizons, new roles for information professionals. We have the honor of having Sue Charles, a research analyst for HP Labs, share with us her professional journey through the LIS field. So take it away, Sue.
I basically did a talk a few months ago to the Northern Colorado Law Librarian Association with a colleague of mine. We talked about working virtually at a large company, and that's how I got invited to do this talk, because I've actually been exactly where you are, and it doesn't seem so long ago, but I've had an interesting transition through my career in librarianship. I'll confess that it wasn't all planned this way. A lot of it was an accident, but I'm going to talk about that adventure and some of the attributes that helped me along the way, and some things you'll probably be able to think about as you think about where you're going to go with your career. And it might obviously not be necessarily in a library. Your horizons are much broader now than they used to be. So with that, I'll go to the next slide. I thought I'd kind of start out kind of showing how I got here. You'll notice in this slide I have some little square path stepping stones that are pretty well aligned. So I'm trying to indicate that my path to HP was reasonably traditional. So you see up in the corner I have the start. I started working in libraries as a paraprofessional shortly after I graduated with a bachelor's degree, a bachelor's of agricultural science at Colorado State University, which is my hometown and where I live now. My husband was still in school, and I was looking for a job. Unfortunately, the jobs in my field weren't real. There weren't that many of them at the time. So I'd always enjoyed being in libraries. I'm a mad reader, like probably most of you are. And I went to the local public library to see if I could find a job. Oddly enough, I got a job with them because they were just bringing up their online system. It was a brand new system that talked to a UNIVAC computer, so that kind of dates me a little bit. But they thought I'd be a good addition because I actually knew how to program computers. Not very well, but I'd taken one Fortran class, and they thought that at least meant I wouldn't be afraid of them. So that's how I beat out a number of competitors for that job. So I worked there for quite a while. And finally, as you see in the middle, I thought, well, duh, I love working here. And I should probably think about getting the degree that enables most of the managers in this library to have their job, which would be an MLS. At the time, in Colorado, we were between library schools. We had no library school. DU would traditionally, that's Denver University, have a library program. But I had to seek a program outside of my state and basically move somewhere else to get to go to library school. So I ended up at University of Texas at Austin. So right here, where it says you are here, that's where I was. UT Austin, it was a great program. I really liked it. But I started out totally convinced that I wanted to be a cataloger. But we had some really great experiences doing SciTech reference. They had an amazing engineering library there, run by an amazing woman who was quite inspirational. And so I quickly realized that perhaps I wanted to go into SciTech reference. So that's what I did. When I graduated, I was kind of on the fast track because my husband was still in Colorado working. But I actually found out that there weren't any jobs back in my home state. So I looked afield, selected a job in Texas, went to ALA and got recruited by Texas A&M. and basically went to work for them because I knew at least I wasn't that far away from Austin and I could get back there if I wanted to. But they kept me so busy that I basically didn't visit Austin as much as I wanted. So there I became their official agricultural reference librarian, but we basically did all-around reference for all. I tend to think of that experience as the mash of reference. It was an invaluable experience. It was a fast plunge into the deep end of the pool for doing science reference because that is a big school and there are a lot of programs there and there are lots of engineers and scientists. So basically, as a science reference librarian, I got to do bibliographic instruction and online searching and reference for all of the science-related people and many others, including undergraduates in all the fields at A&M. So online searching was pretty old school at that point. At one time I knew dialogue in and out. I was a dialogue expert. And at that time we were doing it dial-up, which was quite an experience. Shortly after that we got a lot of CD-ROM online databases, so that was kind of the initial plunge into being a digital library at that point. Shortly after that I kind of was doing, there was always a consideration in such an intense environment that you were going to put in your 2 years, get your reference chops, and then perhaps consider where you wanted to go next. A friend of mine from Austin, she was an Austin native, was actually working as a corporate librarian for 3M. And she said, you really should try this. It is very cool, very interesting, and by the way, it pays pretty well. So I went back to my library school, and I basically said, I got hooked into their online career and job search situation. And lo and behold, I stumbled upon a job that was open at HP in my hometown, Fort Collins. So that's basically how I ended up at HP. So in this next slide, basically I'm going to show you that you'll see we have little round stepping stones now, and they aren't going in a direct line. So this slide indicates that at that point we had, there were some not so, how shall I say, traditional career paths. So I started in the HP Fort Collins site library. At that time, every library, every major site in HP, at HP, at least in the US, and a lot of sites overseas. We had one in Spain, we had a huge one in Bristol, and they all had their own site libraries and their own site library staff. So we had a very, very close relationship with the business unit people, the managers, the scientists, and the engineers on each of our sites. And we specialized in the technologies and products that they were actually working on those sites. At Fort Collins, I was quite blessed with the fact that we were doing a lot of things on that site, including workstations, servers, networking software, IT management software. We were also doing integrated circuits, so that actually was very appealing to me because I came in with the science background and a good background in chemistry. So that was a pretty exciting stint, being in that library and getting to know my clientele so well. So I think I've covered who my customers were. Besides the scientists and engineers, we had managers, admins, and executives. I did mostly online research, primarily technical, but as time went on, I found that there was a great demand for business and marketing research. We had a specialist in that area, but it took more than one of us to actually handle that. So there was a point at which I started making that segue and broadening my expertise. I actually was hired as well to run on our online catalog, get it up and running. It was networked at that point, which was somewhat unusual. And when the World Wide Web began, I immediately became our webmaster. There were plenty of people on site that were eager to help me learn HTML. So at that point, if you look to the right, you'll see that the path kind of jogs. everywhere I have a little disruption and some yellow text, that's where we had a turning point in my career and the career of my colleagues. So if you look there, we'll see that there was funding pressure within HP. There was a drive for centralization. At that point, some of the smaller HP site libraries did close. So we kind of went along because we were one of the larger site libraries. But at the time, we also thought it would be advantageous for some of us to form a coalition within HP. We did have an informal library network where we all got together at least once a year and talked about issues within our libraries. But as some of the smaller libraries were closed, we decided we were going to try to form a more formal organization. So the Fort Collins Library became, we went under the HP Labs Research Library, which was the largest library in HP and is located in Palo Alto. We became something called GLIS, Global Libraries and Information Services. The interesting part of that is we had a fairly large staff of research analysts, but at that point we began serving everybody in HP, with some exclusions, but I won't go into details. So then you see another kind of steady path going down and some more yellow text. So at that point, yet more funding pressure and further desire for centralization. By that I mean from upper management. This was not our choice. Surprisingly, we had several people decide to leave the library system, and at the same time, my entire library team was laid off, with the exception of me. And one of the reasons I was kept on, because I had done some pretty involved work for some of the executives out at Palo Alto and in other parts of HP. And so they basically wanted to keep me on. And the unfortunate part of that is I got to be the survivor. Attendant with survivor's guilt, and I also got to close my own library, which, let me tell you, was no fun. So at this point, I now become a virtual analyst, a virtual research analyst for the HP Labs Research Library. I don't have a physical space to live in, so I'm virtual by dint of being remote. I'm not yet working out of my house, but I am offered a home to sit with the actual R&D team. This R&D team was working for HP Labs, and they were working on a brand new, exciting technology at that time, which was called virtualization. So I basically started doing my deep analysis within HP Labs when I was working for this team and they were trying to understand the market for this emerging technology. And those of you who may be computer savvy know that virtualization was basically the enabling technology for the cloud. And so I was in on the beginning of all that. The leader of that team basically told me, sit with us, and I want you to do competitive intelligence and in-depth analysis on our technologies and write reports for us to help us understand this. And he says, and I want to know what you think. I don't want you to just compile information, analyze it, and put it together. I want to know exactly what you think. And for me, that was a big light bulb, because I've been thinking lots of stuff up to this point throughout my career at HP. Because I found that one of the things I did is every time I did research, I tended to help analyze it and present it to customers. So but I'll talk about that a little more in a later slide. So what happened here is basically other R&D leaders saw what I was doing for my team, and they wanted more of the same. So I basically became kind of, several large labs caught on to this and started borrowing me for all their in-depth analysis, asking me to make recommendations about the competitive landscape. So about that time, we still had a pretty big staff at the HP Labs Research Library, including a whole team of research analysts. So there you see the next batch of yellow text. more budget badness. Most of the HP Labs library staff was laid off. The library was a very strong digital library. Prior to this point, we had a lot of online resources as well as a physical library, which many people used. But at this point, the library pretty much became digital. There were 2 analysts left, myself and a research analyst who was sitting at the HP Labs Digital UK, Bristol UK library. So basically, that was a rough patch for she and I. We were quite good colleagues and friends. And during that time, she actually looked for jobs and found another one at a university library in Bristol. And so I was left as the only analyst for all of HP Labs. And I was scooped up by a manager who basically I had done a lot of work for in the past. And he put me on my new team, which was the HP Labs strategic planning team. And I have to say, this is the most interesting, challenging, and exciting job I have ever had. And so under the little thing it says, to be continued. So that's where I'm at now. I will explain in this next slide what I do now, because as you've probably noticed, only a small part of it is what I did when I first became a research analyst. So 2 bullets from the bottom, I am still the research analyst for all of HP Labs. But right now I tend to do the really hard stuff. So basically, the staff, the entire population of HP Labs has been become quite familiarized with our digital library resources. So a lot of the bibliographic databases that they would normally, that in the past I would have searched, they have full access to and they can actually search. So the ACM Digital Library, IEEE Explorer, Scopus, Web of Science, Total Patent. So because we lost so much staff, we got to the point where we really had to have kind of the basic research activity be kind of done by the researchers themselves. It's not like they have a whole lot of time, but that's one of the things that had to come out of reducing staff, basically. But I still have people that come to me and ask me the really hard questions. So I get to do some fairly in-depth research on a fairly ad hoc kind of manner. Basically, a lot of people come to me when they're first starting their research proposals and projects and trying to understand the market landscape. And some of them keep me on throughout the life of their project. Right now, I'm a 10% member of 10% of my time is spent working on a research project in one of the labs. So I'll start at the top. I'm right in the middle of working on an HP Labs technology vision. I and the rest of the team, the strategic planning team, have been asked to do this for basically the first time in quite a long time. So I was nominated as the lead on compiling all of the input from the HP Labs directors and thought leaders and generating a vision report, a technology vision, which is basically a written document, which will also be has been repurposed into slides to show executives, as well as other things that we'll be showing people in the future. At some point, some of this will go public. So basically, at this point, I've stepped into the role of being somewhat of a futurist. So before we started in on building that technology vision document, I was in charge of leading the Megatrends initiative. So we kind of got roped into this on a very short time frame. We knew it was coming, and the good news is that as a research analyst and as strategists, we tend to watch the trends anyways. And this was a big part of our job, but we had to formalize it, turn it into an initiative, develop an entire slide deck for the HP Labs leadership so that they could go off and start their visioning exercises. So we're doing ongoing tracking and research into what the trends are as they change, and we will be updating both this and the HP Labs technology vision as living documents, essentially, living initiatives that will go on into the future and be a big part of our research, of our strategy team's mission. So that all kind of sprang out of our main mission, which is being HP Labs strategic planning and portfolio management. As part of that, because I've been close to business units, I kind of got the job of doing detailed analysis on HP business units and mapping them into the HP Labs research portfolio. This is an activity that everyone on my team does. If you all get an actual copy of these slides, I've put a lot of notes in the notes fields, and I've actually explained what strategic planning and portfolio management is. I see I have a question. What are the most important skills you use as a research analyst? Knowledge of sources, how to write? I'm going to cover that in the next 2 or 3 slides. So before I segue into that, I also am in charge using my longtime librarian skills. I am the keeper of the HP Labs External Publications Bibliography, which is actually an online system. So we built a system that generates clean citations for us for all the HP Labs publishing activities. And we use this to generate a bibliography that we put into our HP Labs annual report. Okay, I will answer that question as well. I see. How did you get buy-in from supervisors for additional professional development and education? I will actually answer part of that now. I have had some amazing managers, and this is not something everyone is lucky enough to have. My first manager, and the one I had for the longest time, wasn't too keen on professional development education outside of my existing role. So basically we had a lot of online training for searching, and we also had a separate market research group at that time. So I only became big on market research as kind of an offshoot of my business and marketing professional development, so to speak. But once I had my last 3 managers were very, very big on this. In fact, I'm going to touch on SCIP, which is the Strategic and Competitive Intelligence Professionals Organization, and I have been a member of that for quite a while. I've gone to some of their conferences, and they offer excellent training. So my last 3 managers, very big on professional development and education, and HP is big on it in general. So it is part of something that managers have to do within HP and prove that they are, the conferences. I've basically gone to the SCIP annual conference, which this year is in May. I won't be there this year, but I have actually gone to some technical conferences for HP as well. So, and I've done some separate SCIP training, which was like a workshop where I went to another city and stayed for a few days and did their workshops on competitive intelligence. So I think that about covers it. Oh, right now I manage the HP Labs market research portfolio. So I make all the decisions about the content that HP Labs needs to have for market research purposes. So the IDCs, the Gartners, the Forresters, and some of the niche providers that we need in HP Labs. So I want to start this section with this heading, Thinking Like an Entrepreneur, Even Inside a Global Company. So early on in my career at HP, prior to that I'd worked for a city government and a state government. And when I went to work for HP, it had many amazing things going for it, including some of the most professional people I have ever worked with, just sterling people. And that is true even now. But there were some scary things about working for a company, including things like stock fluctuations and early on some of the first layoffs that HP actually ever did. So at that point, I realized that you really had to think kind of entrepreneurial about not necessarily about getting different jobs, but about how you approached your job, the role that you had at the time, and expanded it and prepared for other roles that might come along. So as I put this here, this is not about being annoyingly or overtly ambitious. In some cases, maybe I wasn't even that ambitious, but I like to think on my feet, and I like to think that I like to plan. So basically, this is about being able to see and seize new opportunities, including new roles for yourself, and that may even include new jobs. Being able to overcome challenges. People come in and ask you interesting things all the time. If you end up working in a reference situation, you will find that is definitely true. If you're working in any research, strategic, future situation, challenges are the norm. So basically, and being able to overcome the barriers that you confront when you have to meet these challenges. And there are always setbacks. You've seen a few setbacks in my path, in my transition in my career, but there are daily setbacks. Being able to get things through procurement, being able to find the right people to talk to. I mean, you just have to start feeling comfortable with that kind of thing. Being a great problem solver is really handy. Yeah, this enables you to feel good about your destiny and feel like you have some choice and some control. I mean, if you didn't plan ahead a little bit, things can happen in a company that can make you feel totally out of control. And I know that's true for all organizations, not just companies. And it helps you look back and see that the change you encountered, even if it was horrible at the time, such as closing your own library, ended up leading you to a good place in most cases. So every big upheaval I've gone through, I've been able to look back and go, wow, this really offered me an amazing opportunity. Yes, I was going to put that that's in my next slide. You gain a whole new set of skills every time you go through one of these transitions or overcome a new challenge. One challenge that I had to overcome when I was in my earliest research analyst job at HP is someone just walked in one day and said, we want to set up a document management system. And you're a librarian, so you seem like you'd be a perfect person to help us do that. I had never done anything like that. I never interviewed software providers. I mean, I talked to representatives from Oracle. I talked to people from, at the time, Documentum and some of those other big document management companies. I'd never written an RFI, which is a request for information or proposal. I got to do all of those things and set up this document management system, work with a really talented IT person to run it. So that's just an example. These things happen, and they can just come out of the blue. And one thing I got out of that was I had experience in publishing in my academic publisher parish environment, which I actually really like writing. So I did get a chance to write a paper in online about that very experience. So let's go to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about attributes. I've got several slides of these. So the first thing was aptitude that, I naturally had, but I didn't realize I had. But I always was driven to think about the bigger picture. So basically, I do research and I think about what are the implications of this technology, this interesting trend, or something a competitor was doing. What does this really mean to HP's market in this space, to the competitive landscape as a whole, our competitors and ourselves and how we position against each other, and our future as a company. So that kind of thinking basically made it an easy segue for me to seek out ways to use this aptitude. And I didn't necessarily have to seek them out, because what happened was people noticed that about me. I do research for them. They go, wow, that was really cool. You pointed out something that I hadn't thought of. You're actually doing analysis for me. And so that became more common, and basically word spread. Curiosity and an open mind. This will get you many places. Some of you probably go, God, some of the things I must do on my job must be kind of strange and boring. Well, no, actually they aren't. I've always been curious about science and technology, and not just high tech, but my background's in biological and agricultural sciences. So I'm very comfortable with scientific method and thinking that way. but I'm also an artist in my spare time. So I have one of those right brain, left brain things that really helps me in the situation and makes me kind of a different person within HP. I can bridge the gap often between highly technical people and executives and marketing types. So I'm appreciated for that, and a lot of that is my curiosity and being open-minded about the people that come to me and say, I want you to research this field. And I'll go, I know nothing about it, but I'm sure going to go out and find out about it. And usually they aren't disappointed. So, so I guess I should add just stubbornness, diligence, and being very detail-oriented to that bullet. So that helps too, and that's a trait that a lot of us have when we go into librarianship. So flexibility is a big one. I realized early on that I had to be willing to do many new things, and that at HP change was inevitable. Life in RD is what engineers love to use the term orthogonal. Life in RD is orthogonal rather than linear. Every day is different. Engineers love to try to at least try to think out of the box, so to speak. So by orthogonal, they mean going at right angles in a different direction from what you might expect. And this they see as a key asset for them in problem-solving skills. So, and it's really true. But I love orthogonal. It's interesting. So you can't be afraid to try new things, as those opportunities will come up, or at least don't act afraid that don't act afraid to try them. You might be quivering inside and go, oh my God, this is going to be the biggest weird thing I've taken on yet. But don't act afraid, and if you don't take these chances, you'll never know if you can do them. And plus, people will stop asking you if you want to try something interesting and new. And these new challenges, not only do they give you new skill sets, they are great confidence builders. So with that, we'll go to the next one. Key attributes that got me here. It does help to have really great mentors. And as I hinted in my answer to that question, these can even be your bosses. So I've been lucky that I've had bosses that wanted to be great mentors. But right now, one of my best mentors is the guy who was never my actual boss, who sits next to me when I'm in the office, and he was the leader of the R&D team that I first got to sit with. And he basically became a very great mentor for me. So he's really great on knowing the ins and outs of an R&D organization and how the engineers think. So I've had some great mentors, and I never really had to seek them out, which was really lucky for me. But HP does have mentor programs, and if you get into a situation, into a climate where you have that opportunity, I would highly recommend it. Sometimes these will be the people that give you the new challenges and the encouragement that you can succeed at these challenges. So that was my experience with the person I was just describing. And I've had several of these basically research projects, special assignments that turned into these really involved situations that were exciting opportunities, and I ended up with some mentors. Next, be a great team member, and by that I don't mean, I mean things much deeper than they often say about being a team member, cooperating. Being a very strong contributor, sometimes you have a tendency to just really want to do things on your own, work on big projects on your own. I mean, you can still do that and have a really great relationship with the rest of your team. And believe me, with the team I've got, I'm on a team of all really strong contributors. And I'm an old horse who can still learn new tricks. So I have recently learned how to write in tandem very complex documents with a lot of contributors. So even I can still learn. So key attributes team members like: honesty, reliability, trustworthiness, strength, and actually humility. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't be like, tooting your horn. It's just, you have to acknowledge that they're great at what they do too. and acknowledge that they have had accomplishments. You have to have the willingness to step up and pitch in even when the job isn't officially yours and it seems like a big new challenge. This is a fabulous way to expand your skills and your responsibilities. By the way, it does really take a great manager to create this and maintain this type of team environment. So my wish for all of you is that you find really great managers in your career. Don't be shy about acknowledging your achievements, but do it with sensitivity regarding your team and your colleagues. You will find that they are more eager to acknowledge and boast about your achievements as well as their own. So they really appreciate this. And by all means, build your team of fans. Do good work for people and they will pass the word. Many people, especially in kind of an analytical environment like an engineering environment, they have to experience your work firsthand. But once they do and you prove yourself, they are more than happy to, well, I can't say share you because sometimes they resent that other people are taking your time, but they're more than happy to pass the word that you can get the job done. So here we have some more key attributes. Believe it or not, I was shy and hated public speaking when I first got to grad school. But I quickly learned that if you know your stuff, just talk about it. And this applies to all situations. Speak up. Polish your presentation and writing skills. Be able to speak to other people at meetings, in groups. Be able to speak to executives, and even on the spot. And I have to say, the elevator pitch is probably my weakest point. So I still have places where I could really improve, but these are skills that are pretty essential. The next one is articulate, describe your desired future. And I'll readily confess, I was pretty late to the game on this. What really got me doing this was the experience that I had to polish my resume up. And in reading about writing modern resumes, I thought that you should have a vision statement for yourself, basically. So I articulated my desired future before I got it. So I stated that I wanted to be a competitive intelligence person, a strategist, someone who looked at the big picture, covered the competitive landscape, looked at future trends, and that was basically how I articulated my future. Not many people saw that, although we do post our CVs or resumes within HP, so people can see that. But basically, that was a good way for me to focus, yeah, there is something that I could move towards, and I can do it here in HP. Okay, what else we got here? So I thought I'd talk a little bit about other jobs, not just mine, but I'm sure you've all noticed this thing called big data. HP Labs is real involved in this. We have a whole lab of people that is working on this, on information management and analytics, including big data analysis and management. There's a boom in this area right now. It's the hottest thing since cloud. So any of you who follow the technology press, this is becoming a really big deal. Basically, people are starting to realize that they need insights into all of the data that is exploding around them. So IDC predicts, over here on the right, they just came out with this report. They are the first people to kind of try to define this market in a formalized way. But they're predicting that big data technology and services will reach $16.9 billion by 2015, which is a 40% per year growth rate. This is what we consider very fast growth in a tech market. Amazing growth. The problem here is data and information science professionals, there is a shortage right now and into the future. So EMC, which is a big technology company that is very involved in this area, they've recently predicted that 65% of data science professionals believe, they went out into the survey, and the professionals believe that demand for data science talent will outpace the supply over the next 5 years. With most feeling, and this is important to you, this supply will be most effectively sourced from new college graduates. McKinsey did a big, huge report. They've done several on big data, but their report from May 2011, they came up with the statistics where the U.S. alone faces a shortage by 2018 of 140,000 to 190,000 people with deep analytical skills. These are probably the information scientists, i.e. you guys, and people from computer science backgrounds. But you know, those things are all merging. So, you know, if you understand how to manage and organize information, and you have an analytical mindset, you can go very far in this area. McKinsey goes on to say there are 1.5 million managers and analysts. So this includes the managers that run the information management side of businesses and business analysts who have to basically work on analyzing a lot of this data. We are short that many of them who can analyze this kind of data flow and make decisions based on their findings. The good news is a lot of people are working on trying to automate pieces of this, but we still need the humans in the loop. We need the analysts. So basically, this is a really cool thing for you guys. I don't know how many of you, any of you who are inclined to get a PhD, that would be a good thing, but not required by any stretch of the imagination to be one of these people. If you wanted to be an information scientist in HP Labs, that would be something you would want to do. But, you know, I look back on this now and I think, man, you know, one time I toyed with thought of getting a PhD in information science, and if I had done that, I could have worked in the information analytics lab. So there are just many opportunities from across the entire continuum of information management. So there's another slide that I made up after I sent you guys the slide deck, so I'm just going to speak to it. I called it odds and ends. I just wanted to give you a few more examples of other jobs. I have a friend and colleague who worked with me as a librarian at HP, and she has since segued into running an electronic medical records initiative for a very large major local hospital system. So there's her skills in information management. She was able to move into that position and is very successful at it. I know former librarians that are working as competitive intelligence professionals, either for companies or as consultants on their own, strategists, and even futurists. I know librarians that are basically running companies that do analysis and are designing software to do analysis. I talked about SCIP, the Strategic and Competitive Intelligence Professionals. Very easy URL. It's basically www.scip.org. So just attending one of their conferences, their annual conferences, would be an eye-opener. Basically, there are a lot of sessions, and you get exposure to a lot of different people doing a lot of different jobs. So if you are at all interested in this kind of job career, that's a really good place to get a lot of information and immerse yourself in that climate. One thing I'm going to tell you, another statistics before I wrap up and take questions, is when I took some SCIP training, basically on competitive analysis and strategy, one statistic that I took away from that was they asked us all our backgrounds. And basically, those kind of professionals come from two key backgrounds, and you can guess what they are. The first one would be MBAs. Basically, people with business and finance backgrounds. Turns out they're really good at doing financial analysis, but they aren't very well trained at research, and maybe not necessarily finding all those pieces and putting them together. The other background that was most common was the MLS, people with library science degrees. We are stupendous at doing research. We're really good at making the connections among the pieces of research as well as the people. And we have the aptitude for putting the pieces together. This is a natural trait for many of us. And so my story is one of just kind of following the career path and stumbling my way and segueing into that opportunity. So I never planned to be here exactly, but I am glad that I made it to where I'm at. So let that be encouragement, and don't think linearly, think orthogonally, as the engineers would say. And with that, I will hand over the microphone.
So if anybody has any questions at this point, go ahead and raise your hand and we can let go of the mic so that you can pick it up. While you're all thinking of questions, I have a question for you, Sue. This is Jill. What advice overall would you give to new grads who are interested in kind of technology work or moving more into this technology side?
Basically, I would tell them, obviously people like that are probably already reading a lot of the tech news and keeping up with it. I don't think it would hurt to take some classes and get some experience in the computer side of things. Or there are other technologies that you might be interested in, biotech or nanotech. Interestingly enough, a lot of these areas are kind of overlapping and merging. So, I got into this, frankly, and this was a while ago, but basically, number one, I had a Bachelor of Science degree. They didn't care what field it was in. If I had a science degree, they were like, yeah, we want you. We want you to do sci-tech reference and research. I also ended up thrown in to work with a lot of engineers. And so it was easy when I saw the job with HP to go to them and go, look, I'm an expert dialogue searcher. I know inspect in and out. I work with engineers. I work with scientists, on a daily basis. I have this agricultural degree, but, basically I got the interview and all I had to do was convince them of my skills. And so the other thing is join some professional organizations. If you're interested, get exposed, basically, to people, to the terminology. I think those are probably the key pieces of advice I would have. I know now people even do information interviews with companies, but as an information professional, you do have skills that companies are starting to really value. And we're seeing, even within HP, they're starting to realize that they should hire more and more people with different backgrounds. So, it's not just the real categorized box-like world it used to be in tech. And I won't say that it isn't still a highly male environment. It is. But, boy, it's for the bold, it is a great place to work.
And you've actually kind of addressed really most of the questions that I was writing down throughout the presentation, so I appreciate that. You did touch on the fact that more tech companies are starting to notice the value in students or people with an MLIS. Can you talk a little bit more about what you think are the most important skill sets for an LIS professional to have today? And you did address some of those, but I'm curious, do you think if there's some that are the most important skill sets that you can think about and that would be important for our students and new grads to know about?
I tried to be pretty thorough because I basically sat down and I kind of relived my career and thought about all of those things that I found helpful. But it's true, it's a different world now than when I came out of library school. It's a fast-paced, very connected world. And I think, the more you are familiar with technology and are able to use it, I didn't even mention, I was probably one of the original members of LinkedIn. Some guy invited me to LinkedIn with him like years ago. So I'm not the world's biggest networker, but that is obviously, a lot of people are really good at that. And the friend I mentioned who got into electronic medical records, she is a sterling networker. And that has made her be able to segue to transition into different careers. So she's much like me. She's worked in academic libraries, corporate libraries, public libraries, and now she's working in the medical profession. So, you know, it can be done. And I think the more open-minded you are, the more kind of understanding you have of where you're trying to go and what the jobs are like, what the skill set is like. I mean, obviously, if you went to a SCIP conference, you'd learn a lot about what people are like who are working in competitive intelligence and doing analysis, and even futurists. Those are some of the most interesting sessions I've ever attended. And a lot of those people work for think tanks and the government. Again, getting back to technology, I think the more you just understand the resources in that area, the trends in the technology area, I mean, that's just always been really handy for me. One of the big things is, as a librarian, I've always thought of myself as this giant information filter and sponge. And so I've always tended to just see things, and the more I know about the people I work for, i.e. the researchers and scientists, I tend to remember what they do. And now as part of the strategic planning and portfolio management team, I have a lot of inside information about their projects. I tend to very proactively throw information at people and go, hey, I kind of thought you'd want to see this. And I don't overwhelm them with information, but I tend to be real. I tend to use my analytical skills to go, I know something about this person. I know this is an important thing to them. So this is something that also comes with experience. The more you do research for people, the more you understand what they need. Let me just say, it's kind of the new, I'm kind of the new tech version of the reference interview. So basically, absorb as much as you can about the fields you want to go into, or the technology area if that's where you're going. Talk to people, network with people. I think you'll find that opportunities will come. And like I say, if you're interested in this whole big data thing and information management, keep a line on that, because that is just, it's an explosive area. And it's a great opportunity for people like us.
That was really, really informative, and I thank you so much for taking the time, because I do know how busy you are. So I really appreciate you putting the presentation together and agreeing to come on with us tonight and talk about all you do and your path through the LIS field. So thanks again. Have a fantastic evening. Really appreciate it.